Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm ranking the top 10 players who have played for Arsenal and or Liverpool from the Premier League era. This isn't about position, isn't about the amount of goals scored, but total quality of player in the Premier League era. Allison for me has to get in there. I think we have to have a goalkeeper. David Seaman would get very, very close, but I actually think, hand on heart, if England had Allison in 2002, if Arsenal had Allison in more of the European nights that they had in the late 90s, I think Arsenal would have been a better side. Maybe even marginally by 1%, but I think Alisson's a better keeper than David Seaman. Allison came in. I don't think a club's changed. When signing a goalkeeper, sometimes a goalkeeper takes a while to come in, or it's a bit of a transition. It reminds me a little bit when Man United instantly improved when Van der Sar came from Fulham. When Allison joined Liverpool from Roma, the improvement was almost instantaneous. They went from a challenging side to one of the top sides in European football. Obviously, Van Dijk joined him as well, but the transition and the improvement that Allison brought Liverpool, I don't think that a Premier League side's ever improved that much defensively in terms of who's in the sticks than Allison. I think there's an argument he's even the best keeper in the history of the Premier League. At number 10, it has to be Allison. At number 9, this is going to be a little bit controversial. I've put Dennis Bergkamp at 9. There'll be people that would put him 2 or 3 or 4. My issue with Dennis Bergkamp is there are other players that I think dominated their positions, had a peak that was higher than Dennis Bergkamp in the Premier League, and that resonates with me more as a football fan. Dennis Bergkamp's technical brilliance for 7-8 years at Arsenal was right up there. Probably one of the best first touches in the history of European football. Big goals, obviously won major titles with Arsenal. There are certain players that I've put on this list that I think their peaks were better. I think they took games more by the scruff of the neck. Maybe I'm being really critical of Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp was world class for a couple of seasons at least. I just don't see it above other players that I've put in there. Maybe I'm being really harsh. You have to let me know in the comments down below. But Dennis Bergkamp's in the top 10. I just think he's 9. At number 8, Ashley Cole. Now, putting a left back ahead of Dennis Bergkamp might be a little bit crazy. And I know that Ashley Cole had a lot more probably success at Chelsea in terms of winning the European Cup. But for a good 4 or 5 years, even in the invincible season, Ashley Cole was the best left back in Europe. He dominated that position throughout his time at Arsenal in a way that even Dennis Bergkamp, I don't know if he did in the same way. I think you could debate loads of forwards with Dennis Bergkamp in a comparable way. As an example, with Ashley Cole, it was just Ashley Cole for at least a decade. Maybe you'd prefer Roberto Carlos for his flair. In my opinion, Ashley Cole's the best left back in the history of football, and Arsenal probably had him in his final couple of years at Arsenal were probably peak Ashley Cole. Then he went to Chelsea, and there were a couple of seasons where he didn't always hit the ground running, Ashley Cole, to 10 out of 10 levels. But I'd say at Arsenal, he was consistently a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 left back. He is by far and away the best left back in the history of the Premier League. And again, obviously, he won a lot of those titles at Arsenal. I just think he gets completely slept on. And left backs aren't as glamorous as forwards and what Dennis Bergkamp did, flicking it around people and stuff like that. But you have to throw in Ashley Cole. And I think he is a better left back than Dennis Bergkamp was a forward by a marginal percentage, if that makes sense. So at number 8, Ashley Cole. Number 7, Sadio Mane. I think he gets completely slept on. I think there are seasons during that kind of 4 or 5 year spell where Liverpool won every trophy available to them, where they were going for quadruples. I think there were spells where he was better than Salah. I think there are spells where he peaked beyond Salah's level in terms of his pure athleticism on the pitch, his speed, how he could burst away from people, his quality of finishing, his passing, his link-up play, the way he could drop in. You could play him anywhere. The thing with Salah, maybe it holds him back, I'm not sure. You denote him as this kind of right winger cutting in and doing world-class things, and obviously Salah's somewhere on this list. But Mane on some level gets slept on a little bit. He could play false 9. I think at points when he joined Liverpool, he played right, played left. That versatility doesn't get talked about enough. And I think he was pivotal in what Jurgen Klopp built at Liverpool. He joined in 2016. He was basically one of the first signings of that era, very, very early in the kind of transition from kind of pre-Jurgen Klopp, Brendan Rodgers, Roy Hodgson, that kind of transition out of that Liverpool era into the Jurgen Klopp kind of lean machine of winning trophies. And Sadio Mane arguably was the first pivotal piece in that kind of machine. 13 goals in 27 appearances in his debut season, won Liverpool Player of the Year. And then you look at 90 goals in 196 games, basically 1 in 2 as a left winger. Again, changing position. He was devastating. He was absolutely devastating on his day. Maybe going to Bayern Munich a little bit too early. Maybe his legs are gone. We're not entirely sure. Obviously, he didn't do massively well at Bayern Munich. Did he need to stay a little bit longer to kind of get ranked in the kind of top 4, top 5 of these kind of lists? I'm not sure he cares, but he's a Liverpool great. I do think there's an argument that he's the best left winger in the history of Liverpool Football Club. There'll be Liverpool fans maybe challenging that. But I think he gets very, very close. And there was a period of time where he was literally unplayable, again, for the speed, for the athleticism, for the desire. It was just outrageous. Liverpool had Mane in his prime and Salah in his prime in the same side. No wonder they were so successful. Next up, Luis Suarez. 69 goals, 23 assists in only 3.5 seasons with Liverpool. I think if Suarez wins the title in this kind of Sturridge, Sterling, Suarez season, the Triple S season, I think he goes number 2 on this list. I think you could even put a valid argument he's the best player to have ever played between Arsenal and Liverpool. I really do, because those goals would have contributed towards some sort of success. There's a lot of players that hang their entire Premier League legacy in certain videos that you debate about on one Premier League title, maybe one European Cup. Maybe look at Alan Shearer. With all due respect, he won one Premier League title, and he always gets put in the top 3, top 4 category because of the title that you can kind of use in debates and kind of use as leverage in an argument about these things. Suarez has literally nothing in terms of Premier League legacy, in terms of titles, and he deserved it, because when he went to Barcelona, he was by far and away, maybe if you want to include Gareth Bale, those two only, in my opinion, by far and away the best player in the world, if you don't include the kind of freaks of nature that were Messi and Ronaldo. He was by far and away the best striker in Barcelona history. I know Brazilian Ronaldo would get a claim, but he wasn't there for a very long amount of time. Suarez won the treble. Suarez was part of one of the fiercest front threes in the history of football. And at Liverpool, that level was there. It's not like he improved massively at Barcelona. I just think he carried on his level from what we saw in the Premier League for 3.5 years. Think of the range of goals that he could score. Free kicks. He was one of the best finishers and poachers in the box. I mean, I have people still talking to me about Robbie Fowler's finishing. You think Suarez is a better finisher than Robbie Fowler, and Robbie Fowler's whole game was being in the box and being a poacher. Suarez could do that. He could carry the ball 40 yards. He could link up play. He could nutmeg people. One of the best kind of street footballers in Premier League history in terms of little nutmegs, little shoulder barges, big in the challenge. Nasty footballer, biting people. Not sure if it always, covers him in glory. But in terms of pure level, and that's why he's above Dennis Bergkamp for me, because the level I saw from Luis Suarez was at a much higher level than Dennis Bergkamp in terms of what I saw at Arsenal with Dennis Bergkamp. I'm being completely real. I just think Suarez achieved a higher level of footballing performance. And I think if he'd won the Premier League title, again, he'd be right up there with certain players that obviously are going to be sort of 2 and 3 and 1 on this list. Outrageously good. Just rewatch the Norwich City hat-tricks. I think he scored multiple, didn't he, against Norwich City? I mean, everyone scores hat-tricks against Norwich City. But it's just a crazy level of football. You could argue his peak for one season, he had the best one-season peak in the history of Premier League football. I think that season he was missing a load of games because of Ivanovic as well. Let that sink in. Just rewatch some of the highlights. It's crazy. And he's still doing it as well. He is undoubtedly a modern great in that position. Above him, I had to put the only defender in the top 5. It's Virgil van Dijk. Arsenal fans will be talking about Tony Adams, Sol Campbell. I think Van Dijk goes into the 98 double winning side at Arsenal. I think Van Dijk goes into Arsenal in Paris in the Champions League final, and he makes them better. We can debate if they'd still win the Champions League against that Barcelona side. I think they get a lot closer. They were very close anyway because of Sol Campbell. And obviously Sol Campbell scored in that final. Was Sol Campbell a better centre-back than Van Dijk? Hand on heart, no. He had longer in the Premier League. His time at Spurs, people forget how good he was at Spurs. Then he goes to Arsenal. The reason Spurs fans hate him so much, it's not just about moving from Spurs to Arsenal. Trust me. If he was a dead player, if he was a bang average player, the hatred wouldn't be the same. It's just the way football works. Nicky Barmby played for Liverpool and Everton. No one remembers. Sol Campbell was so good. Spurs fans are devastated because of how good he was. I still think Van Dijk was better than him. I do. I think his distribution is better than Tony Adams and Sol Campbell. Even Kolo Toure, if you want to kind of throw in these kind of defenders that Arsenal had in yesteryear. Distribution, the best out of everyone that I could have possibly picked. Positionally, for at least 3 years, you could not beat him in a one-on-one. I think there's one player that kind of on the statistics, Opta Joe or whatever, said beat him. I think it was Leroy Sané. I think he gave a penalty away against Anfield. I might be wrong. But there's one classified beating of Van Dijk on the outside in a good couple of years. I'm sure there are little examples of players coming on the inside or doing little 1-2s or whatever. He wasn't impenetrable in that way. Obviously conceded goals. But he makes the fullbacks that play alongside him better. He makes even Allison better. He makes the midfielders ahead of him better. I think that Liverpool midfield, you could argue, was a little bit limited. Maybe it didn't win as many Premier League titles as it would have wanted because of how limited it was with arguably, Naby Keita coming in, Oxlade-Chamberlain coming in, Jordan Henderson, these kind of players. I think they were all protected because they could be a little bit more free, have a little bit more expression because of how quick Van Dijk was before the major injury. And he came back after the injury, Van Dijk, and he was unbelievable. Scored a big goal against Chelsea in the League Cup final, big goals in his time at Liverpool, dangerous in the air, a leader beyond all doubt, Tony Adams level leadership. I think he's a better centre-back than Tony Adams. I do. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about that one. Virgil van Dijk is 5th. Above him has to be Patrick Vieira. For 6 seasons in a row when he joined Arsenal, he was put into the Premier League team of the season. Think about some of the players that he would have been competing against from the likes of Paul Scholes, Roy Keane, so many others in that era. And Vieira, I think, was better than Paul Scholes. I really do. I think he was better than Roy Keane. In my heart of hearts, I think he had the athleticism over both of those guys. I think his passing range was out of this world. Big goals in big moments for Arsenal and invincible. Defensively, I think you could have put him centre-back and he would have controlled the game and been a very, very good centre-back if you wanted to put him there. Obviously, similar to Yaya Toure in terms of his build, his stature. But his leadership, and I know he had those scraps with Roy Keane, but his calmness, I think he guided and I think he helped kind of tutor Arsenal towards the success that they had in the early 2000s. His level was always an 8 out of 10. I never watched him when I was a kid ever have a bad game. And his top level games, his peak games, were better than any of the midfielders that I've kind of left out on the shortlist. I'll do that at the end, by the way. I'll put some names in the shortlist. But yeah, Patrick Vieira, I think it's pretty standard. He's the 4th best player to ever play for Arsenal and or Liverpool. Number 3, it has to be Steven Gerrard. Gerrard's level for a good 3 or 4 years was higher than Patrick Vieira. I think there's an argument he's the best midfielder in the history of the Premier League. I think the argument is so valid, despite the fact he never won the Premier League title. I think that says a lot about his legacy, his peak, the amount of goals that he scored. I mean, 120 goals and 504 appearances for someone that started out as a deep line midfielder, finished his career in a side that was very, very limited, and obviously not really pushing for titles. A European side, and in between then he pushed them right on towards as close as they'd ever been before Jurgen Klopp of winning the Premier League title. His connection with Torres was out of this world. His all-round play, his passing range, his shooting, his free kicks. He could lob people with technical brilliance. Defensively, I mean, you talk about people laugh and joke about Paul Scholes saying he's better than Gerrard. And he says, but he wasn't very good in the tackle. But Gerrard's ability to win the ball back in midfield was 100 times better than Paul Scholes. That's a massive facet of being a central midfielder, winning the ball back. And I think Steven Gerrard did that to a world-class level for at least 5 or 6 years. I think there's an argument he's the best central midfielder to ever come out of this country alongside Bobby Charlton. I put him miles ahead of Lampard and Scholes. I really do. And I think if you look at some of his goals, they're not all just smashing it from 30 yards, which is hard enough. There was a goal against Everton in 2001, and he strikes the ball from an angle he shouldn't even be able to strike it from. It's almost behind him. So the power, the technical brilliance to do things like that. But he's got lobs in his locker. He's got mazy runs. Unbelievable midfielder, and he's number 3. Number 2 is Mohamed Salah. I couldn't have a world where Gerrard was above him. Salah has to be top 2 for everyone. If anyone wants to make their own video or reply in the comments, Salah has to be either one or two, in my opinion. His first season, he arrives to a level that maybe a new signing never has done. I'd put Aguero in there. I'd put maybe Cantona when he moved from Leeds United. Some of these big signings that could come in and change things straight away, change the mentality. And Salah came from a kind of background where he wasn't considered world class. He wasn't considered this kind of top level talent. He comes in and scores 162 goals, 74 assists in over 270 appearances. He basically, every 3 games, he's getting a goal and assist. It's absolutely outrageous. Top scorer in the Premier League again in his first season. And everything good that Liverpool did under Jurgen Klopp, I dare say in a very primitive early period of Arne Slot's time at Liverpool. It's also Mohamed Salah, so he's kind of transitioning across managers as well. He is world class. He's the best right winger in the history of Liverpool Football Club. I looked at some of the names that they throw in there. He's better than all of them. He really is. And he could have gone to Real Madrid in his prime and he would have been the best player at Real Madrid. He could have gone anywhere. He really could have. His quality of dribbling, his link-up play, his range of finishing. There are times where you can look at Salah and he'll go 3 or 4 games in a row just scoring headers, penalties, little finishes. You think, is this guy that good or is he just very robotic? Is he a system player? And then he'll do something out of this world. Out of this world with little spins, little nutmegs, little knocking it around people. He'll show unbelievable world-class brilliance to dominate games single-handedly. He's at the highest level a Liverpool player has ever been at the Premier League, and then he won the Premier League title as well. And his consistency, I love consistency in football. A few of these players I've put in, well, they've all been consistent to be fair, but you could argue maybe Suarez as an example where it was like a 3-year spell. What's Salah? What's it, 5-6 years at this level? I don't think he's ever had a bad season. I really don't. He's number 2. Thierry Henry has to be number 1. There is a weird world in the footballing kind of football fan landscape where Henry is not appreciated to the level that he deserves to be. Maybe it's because he played in an era where there's no social media. Henry, for at least 4 years in a row, was doing things the English football had never seen. Yes, English football seen George Best run through players or Cantona do crazy things in the 90s, but Henry did it to a consistent level where every week for 3 years, give or take a few appearances here or there, of course, he would do things in the Premier League. He'd beat people. He'd score. There's an inevitability about the goals he'd score from 30 yards out, free kicks, unbelievable skills, mazy runs. He scored a goal against Liverpool, I think it was 2004, right at the end of the season, where he runs past 6 or 7 people. I think one of them was Jamie Carragher. He just changed English football. He brought a sexiness, a je ne sais quoi to English football that never really existed. Foreign players, you talk about Zola maybe in the 90s. These certain players obviously elevated the game. The Italians that came into Chelsea as an example. Cantona again, the French vibe going on at Manchester United. He wasn't the first, but he brought it on to a whole new level. I think he made people fall in love with football, but just with the way he played, the aesthetic quality. And then you look at his goals. Highest scorer in the history of Arsenal Football Club, which is not easy. Arsenal's a huge, very, very successful football club. And he came in 2000. He left in 2007. For 7 years, he was scoring so many goals that he became the top scorer in the history of the Premier League. Multiple Golden Boot winners, multiple Team of the Season awards. Invincible, 2-time Premier League winner. He's by far and away the best player to have ever played for Arsenal and or Liverpool. And I think Liverpool, if they'd had him in the last 5 years, would have won 2 or 3 more Premier League titles, in my honest opinion. He was just, peak Henry was better than any other player that I've said on this list. It really was. And he did it for a little bit longer than Suarez. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about that. Right, we're going to just reel off some players that have to be mentioned because you're slagging me off in the comments. Michael Owen, of course, won the Ballon d'Or. Thierry Henry should have won that Ballon d'Or as well in 2002. Robbie Fowler, very close. Lundberg, Gilberto Silva, one of the best DMs ever in the Premier League. Nicolas Anelka, obviously played for both clubs famously. Fabregas, Lauren, David Seaman. Ian Wright, maybe more of a, bit too early in the Premier League era, arguably for that. Fernando Torres, Pete Torres. Probably could get on this list if it was just about his peak, about his prime. Xabi Alonso, Trent Alexander-Arnold has to get in there as well. Top 20. Jamie Carragher, I think, gets completely slept on for how good he was for a long spell, consistent. Tony Adams, Sol Campbell, and Alexis Sanchez would have been my 11th. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you very, very soon.